Hi crafty friends, welcome back to another episode of my Big Fat Pink Journal. I'm going to be working on some index cards today. I'm going to alter them to make them really pretty to put in my journal. Almost 5 years ago, I made my first set of altered index cards. That was July of 2020. I've come a long way since then, and so has my channel. But some techniques I keep going back to because they work every time. I'm going to use that same technique of smooshing the inks that I did back then to create the base of today's cards. I'm using the Tim Holtz spray inks. If you don't have the inks in a liquid format and you only have the ink pads, that works fine too. You can just press the ink pad onto a waterproof surface, spray water, and it becomes a liquid that you can then smoosh your card or work into, and it picks up the color beautifully. So the simple idea behind this is just picking up that color off the waterproof surface and letting it do its own thing. Each card is unique. You can never get the same designs. And personally, I quite like the little surprise I get when I turn the card over and I see what design has been created. It's always random and it's always beautiful. I'm working with multiple vintage colors. I've started with the lighter color first and I'm drying well between each color application. So I'm dropping the liquid ink onto my surface and then I'm spraying with water and then I'm taking my index card and smooshing it into the ink. It creates some beautiful puddles that you can then spray some more water on and then move the card around and let that liquidy color move around on the card. The color inks that I'm using for this project are tea dye, vintage photo, brushed corduroy and antique linen. And I'm using this color for the first time. It's called Rusty Hinge. It's not in the spray bottle, it's actually the ink pad refill. But I thought since I'm always just using these inks in liquid format, I can just buy it like this. The color is quite orange. I prefer more muted tones for vintage themed things, but I think it'll work okay. I could lighten it up with gesso later on. I almost always start my index cards with this technique. Different colors perhaps, but I do this smooshing to get these beautiful colors blending. After the backgrounds are done, I will then add different elements to incorporate my theme. I will add focal points and other interesting elements. I'm going in now with my darkest ink, which is the vintage photo. This will be the last color I'm adding. Once I'm done with these backgrounds, I will show you one way to add stenciling to incorporate your theme and to create continuity with your junk journal. I don't know about you, but I'm already finding these backgrounds super interesting. I love the colors. I love the way they're blending. I love the oxidized effect of the oxide inks. And if I had more time, I'd probably make 100. I'm now going in with my trusty gesso. I'm just using my finger for this. And I'm just going over certain areas to help lighten, to create contrast, and to also blend some of those areas. This step obviously is optional. But personally, I do it because I love that misty look it gives the overall background. And I love those areas of white. They enhance the other colors more by adding contrast. Now remembering that oxide inks aren't permanent, they do react to water and they do the same with gesso. Sometimes as you're putting the gesso over, some of the color may lift into the gesso. Personally, I don't mind. I think it creates more dimension. But what you can do is dry that first layer and then apply a second layer of gesso on top if you wanted more white. These are also great for mass make. You could do a whole lot and get them to this point and then they're ready for you to use. When it comes time to use one, you can then add an embellishment, you can add some stenciling, you can add a pocket, anything you need to make it suit your journal or your project. But the base will be ready to go. Here I'm adding that second layer of gesso just to lighten that white a little bit more. I'm going to make my index cards to match my Big Fat Pink journal. In that journal, I do have some touches of a dark pink or a maroon color, which is very similar to this acrylic paint, which I'm going to use today. And then I also have my favorite stencil, which also features in the journal. And I'm just going to stencil a few sections of the stencil with the acrylic paint to create points of interest on the card. I often talk about continuity in a journal. I don't like every page to be totally different. I like the theme to flow through a journal. That is personal preference. And this is one way of doing it. The elements that you create for your journal, you can put touches of elements that appear on other pages to make everything link together. So here I'm using a stencil that I'm using throughout the journal, and then the maroon color, which also appears in the journal. The overall vintage theme, of course, is already there. If I had to use a totally different stencil now, I feel it would be a little bit of an oddball. Or if I had to use another stencil, I would then use that stencil somewhere in the pages too to connect everything together. You may have noticed I was using a little dabber before and it wasn't working great, so I went and found a piece of sponge. It's actually a memory foam and it works great for this type of stenciling. So I'm not filling the entire index card with this, I'm just doing a little section. We just want that pop of color. To lighten the overall look, I'm going to add a bit of white splatter. I'm using acrylic ink for this in the color titanium white. Drying all those layers well, I'm now going to add a little bit of black for contrast, and I'm going to do this with stamping. Using black permanent ink, I'm going to use my favorite script stamp and do a little bit of stamping just here and there on the cards. Again, not covering everything, it's just small points of interest. You could use the cards like this, but I'm going to add some embellishments, as I believe more is more. First though, I'm going to create a frame all the way around using a black fine liner pen. Doesn't need to be straight, just hand drawn as near to the edge as possible. This creates good definition, and I feel it finishes the card off. So I've made 4 of these index cards for the purpose of this video. I will keep one in the journal as it will be a reference journal, and the other 3 I'm going to give away. If you would like to receive one of these cards, all you need to do is comment below. And then in a week I will do a random draw and select 3 names, and they will receive one of these cards as Happy Mail. Don't forget to check back to see if you've won. The names will be placed in the description box of this video and in the video of next week's Big Fat Pink Journal. I have some pretty lace that I'm going to add as part of the embellishment. I have a nice size piece for each card. And then these gold sentiment stickers I found in my stash when I was looking for something else. I haven't used them in years, so I think now is a good time to use them again. I think they're really cute. I've decided to also go with a piece of book page underneath the lace. I tried another ledger paper, but I felt that the color was too similar to my background. This book page paper is much better. I'm also going to add some cheesecloth and some thread. The thread I have is the same color or a similar color as the stenciling that I did. And I'm cutting a piece of cheesecloth and just pulling it roughly to get those nice frayed edges. The piece will be roughly about the same size as the lace. I love using cheesecloth, especially underneath my focal points. I find that it adds really good texture and a good background for those focal points. And then a piece of thread for each card. I'm just going to cut a length of it and then scrumple it up in no specific way. And then I need to see how I'm going to add those gold sentiments. But first I'm going to glue down the lace and the book page. I'm using clear craft glue for this. When I place the cheesecloth, I'm not going to add any additional glue to it. I'm just going to place it in the area where I want it to be. And then when I apply the glue to the sentiment or the focal point that I'm using, that glue is sufficient to glue everything down. It'll go through the cheesecloth to the base. Otherwise, I find if you try add glue for the cheesecloth too, it just gets really gluey and can be quite messy. I'm now going to go and add my scrumpled up thread onto each card. I wasn't sure about placing the gold sentiment just as is over everything, so I took a small piece of cardstock and just tore a small strip, and then I placed the gold sentiment on that. It isn't showing all the way around the sentiment. It's just sort of like a little torn, rough piece with something stuck on top of it. I'm then going to glue that down. The front of these index cards is decorated. The back is open for all your journaling. You could even stick a photo, write a poem. A great journaling spot. Let me show you a close-up of one of the cards so you can see all the beautiful details. And there are lots of ways and ideas to add these to your journals. If you don't want to use it as a journaling card, you can just paste it flat onto a page. You can attach it to a page with a paper clip. You could staple it. You could stick it in with masking tape so it sort of flaps open like an additional page. You could also add it into a pocket. For me, I'm just going to keep mine simple and I'm going to tuck it into my belly band. I really hope you enjoyed this video and were inspired to decorate your own index cards. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the little bell so you're notified every time I upload new content. Thanks again for watching. Happy creating, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.